This is part two of the Indian behavioral scientists' contributions. Uh, to mention a few more individuals who have made a lot of difference and contributed something original in terms of our understanding of human behavior, include people like JVP Sinha, who created this concept of nurture and task leadership. DM Peshtaji, who has done dogs of years of works at IIM Ahmedabad on stress management. And along with Uday, I think uh, created a new way of looking at role stress, organizational role stress, and a whole lot of other kind of things. We'll also remember Pulin Garg and his team who worked for continuously identity, the various dimensions of identity of individuals in India, and multiple forces acting on them, and the need for creating an identity psychology, and so on. Dharani Sinha for his applications of T group theory and a whole lot of things for building institutions as well as organization, popularizing organization concept, development concepts. People like Denison Pereira, who remained in the practicing world, they may not have contributed anything in terms of original theoretical concepts, but they were remarkable in terms of applying whatever they have learned either from NTL or from grid seminars and other kind of things, and popularized a whole lot of this. When it therefore comes to India, it becomes very difficult not to mention institutions, because in India, I think it is these institutions who have contributed a great deal through the various names that I have mentioned so far. I think notable among the institutions are the Indian Institute of Management at Calcutta, Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad, and CET Institute Hyderabad. One name, of course, that figures out in all these institutions, and actually the name that had resounds the moment we talk of training in our country is Dr. Rolf Linton. Rolf came to India in mid 50s to train youth in leadership, and his classic experiment, the Aloka experience, is very well quoted and talked about in terms of bringing about uh, leadership among youth and so on. I think that lays the foundations of our introduction to behavioral sciences. And this is picked up later by CET Institute, where people like Somnath Chattopadhyay, Uday Parikh, Manohar Natkani, KJ Christopher, Sujit Bhattacharya, and a whole lot of other people who got trained in T group theory and who also worked on laboratory education and who promoted laboratory education. Uh, at IIM Ahmedabad, the tradition to some extent was both followed, um, having been influenced by the University of Michigan Institute of Social Research, Tavistock School, where A.K. Rice came and talked about staying at the Ahmedabad Textile Research Association on socio-technical systems approach, where he brought in a whole lot of technology and other kind of related issues, and a whole lot of people at IIM Ahmedabad itself trained into T group theory and so on. So the IIM Ahmedabad, Calcutta, and CET Institute, and at Pune, TMTC, these four institutions together can be considered as the seeds of growth of the Indian applied behavioral sciences. They are the ones who introduced the T group movement into this country, and not only limited themselves to T group, expanded the impact of behavioral sciences to a variety of sectors. A good description of the formation of the Indian Society for Applied Behavioral Science is given both in Dharani Sinha's book T group theory uh, and Somnath's recently written article for the essays in memory of Uday Parikh, HRD, ODM institution building. That gives a fairly good idea of the foundations that have been laid. Uh, if I have to say some of the areas where Indian behavioral sciences have made an impact, I would say it is at all levels. It has impacted on individual level, impacted by bringing in a new dimension which the West rarely talked about, the dyadic relationships. In fact, I still remember Denison Pereira, Uday Parikh, and writing an article in the year 1974 on performance coaching, focusing on development of dyadic relations. We identify development, human resource development, as developing individual as individual, developing individual in relation to the role, developing individual in terms of dyadic relationships, particularly focusing on superior subordinate relationships, or boss subordinate relationships, or appraiser appraiser relationships, and internal customer relationships, and so on and so forth. So we picked up dyad as a unit, and we talked of the importance of dyadic, strengthening dyadic relationships. And this is where performance coaching or counseling becomes a very important tool in building a dyadic relationships. Later, Uday talked about individual, developing individual as an individual, and developing the role in relation to the role, and developing individual in relation to the role. I think these are wonderful kind of a conceptualizations which were uh, which later impacted our understanding of organizational behavior and behavioral sciences. Uh, we we would also talk of the impact that has been made on groups and group theory, and that is where I think it is largely the contributions of ISAPS and its variations in using groups to bring about change in individuals as well as bringing about change in teams and inter-team collaboration. And organization, as far as organization development is concerned, that is another area. So Indian behavioral scientists impacted change in individual level, change in dyadic relationships, change in relation to the role, change in relation to the teams, inter-team work, and ultimately the organization development, which even today stands out as a science of bringing change in larger organizations. The sectors where Indian behavioral sciences has made a lot of difference are all sectors. It's very difficult to say there is one sector. Uh, Indian behavioral sciences has made phenomenal impact uh, on the industrial sector. Starting in early 60s, when people like, or mid 60s, when people like Somnath Chattopadhyay, Uday Parikh, Mrityunjay Atreya, Sujit Bhattacharya, and all of them introduced T group training in the State Bank of India. And later, grid based seminars introduced by K.K. Anand, Denison Pereira, and others in Larsen and Toubro. And subsequently, uh, picking up again a whole lot of these training methods, I think it impacted, and you name it, I think every kind of industry and so on. Survey research became very popular. Organizational climate surveys became popular. Today they can be seen as employee engagement surveys, or employee commitment surveys, or happiness at work surveys. These are all essentially contributions of behavioral scientists. Or HRD climate surveys, after-based kind of climate surveys. This is uh, based on the assumption that if a person has to give his or her best, you should create the right kind of an environment. And the environment can be periodically measured using organizational climate inventories and so on. I must share here my own experience of conducting organizational climate survey in mid 60s uh, under the guidance of Dr. Somnath Chattopadhyay. It was a very interesting study of studying the small scale industries, studying the productivity of employees in small scale industries, and correlating with the organizational environment of the small scale industries. That was the time new patterns of management just emerged of Francis Lecourt. We read his book, we made survey of other literature, and constructed an organizational climate and questionnaire. Uh, Thanks to Somnath, we were all led into this particular kind of a thing. And we measured productivity using work sampling method, 1966-67. And the same method I've used almost 20 years later with Rolf Linton in Indonesia when we were doing task analysis of a hospital in central Java and professionalizing health systems management in Indonesia. Uh, so I think if you look at the sectoral kind of contributions, the behavioral science as a sector contributed to the banking and financial services. You name the bank that has used the some HR or the other intervention. Name the bank, we can tell you. Started with State Bank of India, all associate banks, started HRD departments. Bank of Baroda, reorganization we had done, and a whole lot of other things. NIBM, I think a large number of behavioral scientists were associated with NIBM. Go to health sector. I think the entire impact of National Institute of Health Administration, Central Institute of Family Planning, which later became NIHFW, and their work on OD in hospitals, initiated by people like Awad Ahmad sitting here, Dr. Uday Parikh himself, Manohar Nadkarni, the Behavioral Science Center, a center that was started in, I think, in early 70s with Manohar Nadkarni returning from the US. So health sector has been impacted, education sector has been impacted. We have written books on education sector. We are all associated with this. Behavioral scientists. If you look at, therefore, not-for-profit sector, NGO sector, I think they can't be a better example than all that has happened with the Pradhan and Pradhan's impact on a whole lot of other behavioral sciences later, and the number of NGOs that have participated in ISAPs and associated programs. And in the government too, I think in the earlier part of ISAPs, every summer training program used to have a train the trainer in laboratory education, where we associated ourselves with a large number of people and trained government trainers. In fact, it became very common in all training programs of government to start with a OB lab, a 2-day lab, whether it is IIPA or NI or even Masuri Academy or any other kind of places. I think this is the kind of impact that the behavioral science have made in sectors. So you have sectors, you have institutions, and you have individuals who made a lot of difference in applied behavioral sciences in this country. What has all this added up to? I think this is something which I will discuss in the third in the series. What exactly is the impact? What benefits has the society drawn from these behavioral science interventions?